Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am so honored and happy to say that today we are met with Sean Swarner. That's joining us here at I Need a Speaker. Sean, thank you so much for taking some time to meet with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. We discussed this before we started recording. We're like, well, what should my title be? And you were like, entrepreneur, philanthropist, keynote speaker. I'm like, that's all true. And then I'm also thinking, well, there's multiple world record holder, author. I have a film, an Emmy nominated film on Amazon. And I realized, my goal in life is to inspire people, but motivate them. And I think the biggest component would be empower them. So I want to say that my title is a global empowerment leader.
I love that. That's amazing. I say better than I ever could. That's so much to say. And I think you summed that up very, very well. So, to get right into it, if you don't mind giving us a brief history of yourself and what you're doing now and how you got there.
That's another easy question. I am the only person in history to climb Mount Everest, the highest mountain on every continent. I have skied to the North Pole, the South Pole, and completed the World Championship Ironman triathlon in Hawaii, which I accomplished after surviving two terminal cancers, a prognosis of 3 months to live. I was given 14 days to live. I was read my last rites. I was in a medically induced coma for a year, and I only have one functioning lung.
Wow. Yeah,
So
absolutely speechless. That is, I don't, how did you begin finding what you're doing now to go from everything that you did, to go through everything that you did in your life, and now be an activist, be an entrepreneur, climbing the highest peaks on all of this world? What inspired you to take that leap and do so?
going through the cancers, I really found a deeper purpose. And I learned how to tap into my personal core values. So, a quick story would be when I was 13, battling through my first cancer. I remember I was about 70 pounds overweight because of the treatments. And I was in the shower on my hands and knees, sobbing because my hair was coming out in chunks. And I remember that the water was filling up because the hair clogged the drain. And as I was pulling these chunks of hair out of the drain, I realized I didn't want to focus on not dying. I wanted to focus on living. So I didn't want to focus on the avoidance of something. I wanted to focus on actually accomplishing something. And while I was in the shower, I also projected into the future just a few months, because I was given 3 months to live, what my parents and my family's lives would look like if I wasn't there. So one of my personal core values is family. And I thought to myself, what would my mom and my dad be feeling? How would they deal with the death of their firstborn son? And that was enough motivation to get up off the shower floor, dry off, go outside, and live every day passionately to the best of my ability. And I also learned by doing that, because I had bad days, good days, bad days, good days, every day that I was alive, I realized I was very fortunate. And I also realized that I didn't need to be the best, but I always wanted to be my best. And to do that, just how you get to the top of Mount Everest with one lung, you take incremental steps, one step at a time. You don't just magically show up at the top of Mount Everest. You put in the hard work. You believe it's possible. Start at the end. Focus going backwards on what steps you need to take to get there, and having the right purpose and drive and desire to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's applicable. I mean, I want to say how inspirational that is to take such a hard thing at such a young age and have the mindset to think so positively of it. I think that's absolutely incredible and inspiring. And to share that message in the position that you are in now to others to have a similar mindset is a beautiful thing to do for the world. But you talked about having that motivation to every day to do your best for that day, but every day that can look differently. So, climbing Mount Everest, doing these amazing things that you're doing now, I can imagine that some days you're going to have off days, but to accomplish things so vast, those off days might not be able to come as often as maybe you're feeling them, if that makes sense. So, what on those days do you do that you find in your soul, ignites your soul, or motivates you to keep getting up and accomplishing your goals?
So if I told you I was positive and happy and upgoing and had a smile on my face 24/7, I'd be a liar. There's no one who's like that unless they're taking some sort of prescription drug to make them feel better. Right?
Yeah,
And
true.
I realized at such a young age, when I was going through, again, when I was going through my treatments, going through the treatments is where I learned a lot about life. And it's very applicable for everyone. The hard and difficult times teach you to appreciate the good times. And when I was going through the treatments, I'm a huge believer in the mind-body connection. Vivid visualization has been proven time and time again. And I would always picture myself swimming and doing something that meant something to me. For me, it was swimming the 50-meter breaststroke. I would touch the wall and I would turn around and I would visualize myself coming out of the water in first place. It would remove me from that horrible situation. But in the good times, and it would remove me from that horrible situation and put me in a good situation mentally. But in the good times, I would enjoy them and be fully in the moment and fully immersed in the moment. One of the things that a lot of people don't do is take responsibility for their own actions and their place in life. And I think in any situation, I couldn't control the fact that I had cancer. Did I sit there and ask myself, why me? Why me? Absolutely. But that didn't change the fact that I had cancer. What could change was my perspective and attitude towards it. So in any situation we're given, we always have a choice in how we want to react to it. Nothing outside of me makes me feel a certain way. People say, oh, I have triggers. This makes me feel that way. For the longest time, I would have to go in once a year for my checkup. And just hearing that 6-letter word cancer would send me in a downward spiral. Depression, oh my God, do I have another year to live? Because no one's ever had Hodgkin's and Askins sarcoma before. I go in once a year for my checkup. They don't know what's going to happen. For the longest time, I would go in and just freak out and be terrified, go into a panic attack, until I realized finally I was allowing a 6-letter word to control my emotions, as opposed to me being in control of how I wanted to feel myself. And that was a big step.
I think that's so applicable. And even from a personal experience, if you don't mind me even making that connection, I fully believe in that mind to body connection. I did sports my entire life, and my coach preached that about how you're going to see things is the way that you're going to ultimately do them. If you're going to think that if you don't think you're going to win this race or cross that finish line, then you won't. You have to believe that you're going to do it. So it's amazing what you could accomplish when you believe in yourself, which is so cliche to say, but it's that change in perspective that can do so much for you. If you wake up every day and you're like, this isn't going to be a good day, I have so much to do, then that's the way that those things are going to fall into line. But if you see the positive in it, I feel like the more and more it begins to show. So I think that's incredible that you, once again, noticed that so early at a young age. So how now, as you speak as a keynote speaker and meet so many people, do you shed that message to others? How maybe do you provide that advice to implement that into their lives and take that one step at a time method that you had mentioned before?
Absolutely. I love that question because recently I was approached by Google to give a presentation. And they said, hey, we're looking for an inspirational speaker to come in and motivate our troops. And I was like, well, you got the wrong guy. Like, but your story is so inspiring. And I'm like, that's great. But how many times have you brought a speaker in? He or she has done the song and dance up on stage and then motivated the crowd. Then 20 minutes later at the networking event, the audience is on their third or fourth glass of wine. They forgot everything the speaker just said. It's like, it is a colossal waste of money. It's like, if you want someone to come in and inspire your team, it's just not going to last. External motivation, external inspiration doesn't last. But I told them, if you want someone to come in and motivate them on a personal level, if you want someone to inspire them to believe more is possible, biggest key is if you want me to empower them on a personal level, then you got the right guy. So if you look at, inspiring and motivating people, like I said, it doesn't really work, it doesn't last. But if you can empower someone to do something that they want to do based on their own personal core values. So going back to your question, how do I help people take those little steps? I help them understand who they are. I help them understand what their personal core values are. and then utilize those to take the next step. So I inspire people to believe more is possible, motivate them to take the next step, but empower them to do it on their own. Because once you can empower somebody through their own personal core values, what they value most, not what I value for them. So if I could talk to you and ask you, what do you value most? Could it be family? Could it be personal growth? Could it be security? Now you take those three things and people are looking at, oh, I want to double my salary or whatever it might be. I want to accomplish climbing to the top of Mount Everest. If you have a deeper purpose behind that and you can discover what that is based on your personal core values, now you understand why you want to do it. And you will always, always have something stronger inside of you that will never be able to be extinguished.
I love that. That's a unique perspective, the way that you took empowered and also knew your value. That reflects so much about how you practice what you preach, because you knew that was, you couldn't do one thing, but you could empower someone and you could allow people to find what ignites their soul individually. So I think that perspective is extremely refreshing and also just so representative of what you've done for your life as well. So a little bit switching gears, I guess, in all of your excursions that you've done, number one, I have to ask, what has been your favorite, if you could even choose? And also, building on that a little bit more, you went through challenges very, very early on in your life, but also these excursions have to bring challenges of their own. How have you found that your battles through cancer and that unique perspective and enlightening and inspirational perspective that you developed at a young age, how have you allowed that to shape your experience through these excursions that you go on now on Mount Everest and Kilimanjaro, things similar of that nature? How have you just learned from a young age to take these, I guess, difficulties that you find yourself in when you're in these challenges, if that makes sense?
It does. And I would say that one of the biggest takeaways was I have never made it to the top of any significant peak by myself. We've always had a team in place going through the cancers. I had the doctors, the nurses, the hospital system, the volunteer group, the cancer charities, my mom, my dad, my brother, family, friends, you name it. Going up Everest, I had the Sherpas, I had the guides, I had a Sirdar at base camp. My brother was at base camp. So I have never made it to the summit of any significant peak by myself. There's always been people there supporting me. And my favorite adventure would have to be Kilimanjaro. I recently returned from my 25th trip up Kilimanjaro. And we do it every year as a fundraiser for a cancer charity. And I was adopted into the Chugga tribe a number of years ago, which is a tribe at the base of Kilimanjaro. And I've used the same guides, the same porters, the same chef, you name it. And speaking of team, we have the best team on the mountain. The average success rate is 48%. My groups are at 99% success rate. It's because we do things differently. And I think one of the things that going through the cancers has taught me, and going up and having double the success rate on Kilimanjaro, and I take all these tools and use them with corporations as well. I lead from behind. So many people think they have to have the ego of being out front and blazing the trail, when in all actuality, going back to what we discussed earlier, empowering others, when it's dangerous, absolutely. I'm the first person out there. I'll climb the whatever it takes. But then I'll also tell you, put your foot here, put your hand here, put your right foot there, your left foot there. But when it's not dangerous, go explore. Stay on the trail, and that way I can keep an eye on you in case you decide to fall off the mountain. But I'm always going to be there to catch you and push you back up. But I'm empowering others to explore and do it on their own. Yes, they have a fearless leader behind them, keeping an eye on them and making sure they're doing something that's going to get them to the summit of the mountain. For the most part, if you lead from behind, you empower them and to continue forward on their own terms. Their own discovery can be found out there. But if you look at a peak of any mountain, how many different routes are there to get there? Find one that works best for you, which goes back to your personal core values.
Yes, I love how that all wraps around too. Even with how you now go on the hike on Kilimanjaro yearly to go back to the Cancer Foundation, and how everything that you really do preach about, you implement into your own life. I think it's difficult for some people to take a step back, myself included, and not want to hold the reins and know that, okay, this is going to go perfectly. I need to have control over it. So to take a step back and just provide support to others is just as powerful, but a lot less used, I think. But people just need to feel supported in their journeys, and whether that be Kilimanjaro or starting a new job, feeling like you have a support system to back you in the process can be life changing and really makes a difference.
And things are going to go wrong. You know,
Yes.
you can have the most stringent rules and regulations in place, and you can have your bowling, and you have the bumper bowling up, you know, the bumpers, and the ball is going to bounce back and forth. Things are still going to go wrong in the mountains, in life, and business, anywhere. But when you take a step back and you breathe, you realize why you're doing it. You also can understand, well, maybe this is happening to me so I can learn how to treat somebody better. You know, maybe this is happening to me and I'm going through a difficult time to build me as a character. You know, a lot of people pray, you know, God, you know, please take this away. I pray, you know, God, don't make it easier on me, make me stronger. And so many people don't realize that. They want things to be easy, but there's no satisfaction gained in something that's so simple. It's like winning the lottery. Say you win $400 million, or you work hard and get the 400 million. Might not be a good example because you can then take the 400 million and go have fun with it.
I get where you're getting at.
There's more ownership of it. So things are going to go wrong, you know, but you could also see those as opportunities for growth.
Yes, for sure. And as much control as you ever want to have, to speak on that a little bit more, things are going to come in the path that couldn't have expected, you couldn't have prepared for, no matter what you did. So to take that, readjust, and move forward. And I love that you find that so much more satisfaction comes when things are more difficult, because I could not agree more with that. Every time that I do something that's hard and I have the adrenaline rush going and I get excited about it and then it's finished up, I am so much more content than when I went into it. I wasn't that excited about it. I wasn't nervous. I just had to get it over with. Like, the accomplishment and the sense of just joy that you have when things are finished up, that you know you had to work towards and fight for, is so much more rewarding when it's all said and done.
Absolutely. And one of the best ways to continually push the envelope and become better and better is to constantly raise your standards. You know, in life, in relationships, in health, in wealth, in everything. Constantly raise your standards. I mean, the difference between someone who's making $250,000 and someone who's making $25,000 isn't the fact that the person who's making more money works harder. It's that they have higher standards. And the same thing for other people who are successful. Those who are successful, they have higher standards. And when they meet those standards, they raise those standards. People who become complacent stay at the same level. And the way you raise your standards are, you have a different perspective on what you're capable of doing.
Yes, I completely agree. And I have to ask, out of curiosity of my own, but also for anyone that might be listening, how do you raise your standards, and with so much accomplished, what are some of the new standards that you have for yourself each day? You know, you're always working towards something. How do you go about that? And also, what are they? With so much accomplished, you've surpassed so many goals and defied so many odds throughout your life thus far. How do you continue to do that? To simplify. That's a hard question, but
It depends on where I am in life and what I'm doing. So, for example, I have an online 3-week mindset challenge, right? That helps you utilize your own personal core values to accomplish great things. So you do it for your reasons, not some other guru's reason who's telling you this is what you need to do. No, it doesn't work that way. So I go through that probably 3 or 4 times a year. And depending on where I am, I focus on 3 different personal core values I want to increase. A lot of people may know what their personal core values are. A lot of people go through they have a deck of cards and they whittle it down to 5 or 10 or 1 or whatever it might be. That's great. You have the personal core value. What can you do with it? Nothing. You just know what it is. And that's great. But if you actually rate your top 10 personal core values on a scale of 1 to 10 and how you're living those personal core values, now you can see what and where you need to start focusing your energy and attention. And by my computer, I have a list here that I write down, and those are the ones I want to work on because those are going to help me. And I'm not focused on the money, I'm not focused on the success, I'm focusing on me. And it boggles my mind how many others are out there who they're more concerned about what others think of them than what they think of themselves. And also, in that same breath, it's not selfish to take care of yourself first. Because if you don't, and you can't pour from an empty cup, and if you want to give something back to family and you don't have enough to give, then you're doing them an injustice because you should be giving them more. So looking at personal core values, 4 times a year, I do my own course and I focus on what's most important to me now. And it's constantly changing. But then I focus my energy and attention into 3 personal core values or 5 personal core values to help increase one day at a time.
That's so inspirational and so applicable to anyone. Anyone can do that. That's something so simple. And the one thing that I was going to touch on, but you did in that response, was that a lot of times it all comes from within. And you can have these big aspirations, but if you're not in the right mindset to do so, it's never going to happen. You have to do stuff for yourself first. You have to put yourself in a healthy position mentally and physically to be able to do that. And then that's when things start coming. That's when you start to see things around. Just the sun becomes brighter, I feel like, if that could be accurate. You start to see the good in things, I think, and that's when maybe the job starts working out better or friendships become more fruitful and lively once again because you're bettering yourself. So I think that all comes from within.
Absolutely. It's your life, right? And no one can change your life except for you. So many people think to themselves, well, once this happens, I'm going to be happy, right? Well, happiness is a choice. It's an internal job. Why are you, once they say you want to double your salary, go back to the finances again, say, I want to double my salary. And once that happens, I'm going to be happy. And I was working with a client on this. It's like, so once you get to $250,000, you're going to choose to be happy. It's like, absolutely. It's like, well, if it's a choice, why don't you do it now? So many people are waiting for other things to change when the real thing that needs to change is you. Like you said, if you change your perspective on things, things really do change. If you look at something from wake up and you start looking at something and you're like, oh, I'm so angry. Well, of course, then you're going to get that energy back. But if you wake up and you look at something, the exact same thing from a different perspective and say, oh, I'm super happy and grateful that this is happening. Your whole entire life can be flipped upside down, or it can be a gift.
Yes, it really does. It does come back to perspective. And I think that's something that gets away from people very easily. Life is busy, life gets busy, but to ground yourself and remind yourself of core values that you may have, I think that's incredibly, incredibly prevalent, or should be rather, in people's lives. So it's always important to remind yourself of that. And I love that you do that so often for people. Wrapping it back around a little bit to I Need a Speaker, for our audience and listeners that are so happy to be listening to you today. I guess I'll ask a question on behalf of them. For our audience that consists heavily of event planners and speakers like yourself, and your speaking engagements and your experiences, what have you found to be beneficial or betters your experience, whether from anyone in the industry, whether that's working with an event planner who's extremely considerate of your traveling plans, or receiving an itinerary from someone that you know exactly what you're doing when you're doing it? What do you suggest from your experience thus far that others should look to implement in their own conferences that they might be putting on this year or upcoming?
Interesting question. And what hit me immediately was ask more questions. You know, as a speaker, so many people come in and they say, "Oh, this is what I can do," and maybe the person comes back who's hosting the event and says, "Okay, well, we're not interested." When I get on a phone call with a potential client or an interest, I ask more questions than I speak, and I think it helps because they understand that I care about them, but I'm also learning more about their event and how I can help them. It's not about me. It's about what they want. It's about what you want and how to make your event amazing. And not just an event, but an experience. And I think if more people would be genuinely and authentically curious to learn more about the other person, this could be, again, going back to business, life, whatever, the world will be a much better place to live in.
Yes.
But the speaker then understands more about what's happening to tailor and give a much better experience.
Yes. I completely agree. And it's funny that you mentioned authenticity because that was a conversation this morning that I was having. And it was in regard to an event that was being put on. And the CEO was talking about how he went out and he did something probably unconventional, but there was an 80s theme to the conference. And long story short, he came out with a boombox on his shoulder and showed a complete different side of him that you wouldn't normally see at a business convention. But his reasoning for that was that he's like, if you show the side of you that people don't always see and you're authentic to yourself, people not only want to listen to you, but they're also having fun. So it makes the experience that much more enjoyable for everyone. But then you're also being heard, and people feel that they can be their selves as well. And I think it overall creates such a more, just a safer environment for everyone involved to ask their questions and share their real opinion, which overall just leads to a better experience for everyone involved, I believe.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll be honest, when I get up on stage, sometimes I'm nervous. When I do these podcast interviews, sometimes I'm nervous, sometimes I'm not. But I'm human. I'm a human being just like everyone else. I've been called a cyborg before or superhuman because of what I've accomplished. But the truth is, my first goal was to crawl 8 feet from the hospital bed to the bathroom. Because I was tired of soiling my sheets and vomiting for 36 hours straight. So as soon as you bring in that human component, that human element, we all start at the same level. When you're climbing a mountain, everybody starts at base camp.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm so, so glad that you've gotten so much farther in your life because I couldn't think of anyone more deserving. So this wraps up our time here today. Thank you so, so much for everything that you shed light on. I think everyone is leaving this time that they spent with us today feeling inspired, and hopefully goes and implements what we talked about a little bit today, whether that's changing their perspective a little bit on things today if something goes wrong, changing their core value or implementing some more core values into their life. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.